Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Improvtoons. Today, we're going to go over a format called the Cloud Atlas. Now, the Cloud Atlas is a longer format. It typically requires an hour to an hour and a half when I saw it performed because there's an intermission built into the format. That's actually part of the format. Now, I didn't see it a lot in Los Angeles because in Los Angeles, your time frames are usually 12 minutes. I've actually seen 7 minutes, and there was a theater I performed at where there was like a 3-minute slot. But you typically, because of the high concentration of improv teams, it was typically 12 minutes to 20 minutes was your standard improv set. 22 is like the common, is like 22 all the time. But anyways, so you didn't see it a lot in Los Angeles. I don't want to overtalk it. I want to get to the Rainbow Players so you guys can explore the format for yourself. Rainbow Players? Let's welcome in the Rainbow Players, and today we're going to talk about an improv format called the Cloud Atlas. Now, the Cloud Atlas runs usually for longer improv shows. I've seen it performed once, and it's usually like an hour to an hour and a half because the format is contingent upon having an intermission or a break in the middle. You can decide what that looks like for your team. But let's go over this. Remember, I always say, make the format suit your team. If you have to modify it, or let's say your team already does this and you do it a different way, I want to hear about it, post it in the comments. That's wonderful. So in the Cloud Atlas format, let's say there's going to be 4 scenes and you're going to revisit those 4 scenes, right? So let's say there's scene 1 and scene 1, blue and orange step out. This is going to be a slower scene. You want it full of emotions, relationships, and specifics. This is a grounded scene. You want emotion, and then that scene goes on for a little while. Scene 1, blue and orange. Let's say that they are at an airport. Okay, airport. So scene 2 goes on. Let's say that's let's say it's gray and purple. So scene 2 goes on. You want to open up the world a little bit more by doing something different than the very first scene. You want to do something that you want to show more diversity in the world because the challenge is going to be merging these worlds together. So gray and purple start a scene, whereas the first scene was at the airport. This one's going to be at inside a Motel 6 that's abandoned, which is a motel, like an abandoned motel. So we have to figure out how we get the airport and motel and the motel merged together. Okay. So scene 3, if scene 2 wasn't that far off the mark, scene 3 is going to be even farther off the mark. So scene 3 is going to be green and pink. And green and pink come on stage, and they are going to play candy bars at a grocery store. So they're candy bars on the shelf at a grocery store, and they're talking to each other, which is one of the reasons why scene 1 should be grounded, should be emotional. And as your team gets better with this, you can mix it up a little bit. Okay, but you're also seeing how these 3 scenes are very different from one another. So scene 4 comes out. It's going to be Red, and Red is an old man looking out the window, and he's wondering what he's done with his life. It's a one-person scene. Okay, you want to find levels. If scene 3 with green and pink was really like funny, and they're candy bars, and it's like really weird and absurd, scene 4 with just Red can be slower. It can be dramatic. It can be a little more heartfelt. And so you find those levels because the challenge, or the reason that the audience is really engaged in this, is because they want to see how the heck are all 4 of these stories tied in together. Okay, then you have an intermission. The team that I saw perform this at intermission, they literally plotted out how everything's going to happen. I think it might be good just to challenge it yourself and just see how in scene and on stage collaboration that you make these connections happen. So in the second half, in the second act of this improv set, you're going to start off with scene 4, which was that last scene. So it's going to be Red on stage again. Okay, scene 4 is basically the conclusion of the story, right? They're going to tell you like how everything ends. So scene 4 was the old man looking out the window. He's all he's really feels like he's done nothing in his life, and you found out that he's been writing these stories, and the stories are all the characters put together. Or you find out, so that we'll just use that example for right now. But scene 4 is the conclusion, like what is going to be at the end of all 4 of these stories, even though it's the first scene in the second act. It's a little advanced, but let's try to do this. Okay, then you're going to go to scene 3. What happens is basically the Cloud Atlas is you do 4 scenes in one order, and then the second act is doing them in the reverse order, trying to tie the scenes together. That's basically the Cloud Atlas. So scene 3 would be green and pink. They were the candy bars on the shelves. They find that you discover that so scene 3 you want to tie into scene 4, and you find out that the candy bars are what fueled the author and allowed him to get their visions, and they're missing him because he hasn't come by in a little while, so he hasn't been writing in a little while. So you find out how scene 3 is tied into scene 4. You do that. And then you come back to scene 2, who ties into scene 3. And scene two was gray and purple, and they were at the abandoned hotel room, and you find out that they were the characters in the writer's story, and the hotel used to be alive, but as the writer's lost his inspiration, then the hotel's breaking down, kind of like in the concept of the metaphor for the story, right, kind of thing. So you're finding out how all these scenes are brought together. You come back to scene one, which was blue and orange, which was the very first scene. They're in an airport, and you find out that the writer is going to be on the next plane because he's going to go back home and he's going to give up his life, whatever kind of thing. And then at the end here, characters can intermix into each other's scenes, but you're basically setting up the palette, or the platform scenes are in the first act, scene one, scene two, scene three, scene four, and that's why it's good that they're grounded and emotional and also diverse from one another, because the audience is going to say, like, how are these scenes tied together, and you're going to show them. Now, there's a challenge here. You do not have to do this, especially if it's your first time doing the Cloud Atlas. But there's a challenge here, is if you can do it chronologically. I know this sounds really advanced, but if you can do it like, wow. And when you start off, if you start off from the beginning to the end, and in the second act, you go from the end to the beginning, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost the second half starts off with how everything is going to end. And then when it comes back to that final scene, which was literally the first scene in the show, you come back to that scene with a renewed respect, or there's new information there that allows you to look at the characters and the situations differently. So that's the Cloud Atlas format. I hope you guys make it work for you. I hope you have a great time. It's a little more complex, and it's typically for a longer show because you have an intermission in it. You can do a very shortened version and maybe do 2 scenes, a group game, and then another 2 scenes. But part of the challenge is how do all 4 of these scenes tie into each other, especially if they're like in weird offshoots, like in the example of like an abandoned hotel and 2 candy bars talking on the shelf. How are those 2 scenes going to tie into each other? So good luck. And as always, if you're having fun on stage, throw the format out the window, because an audience is never going to leave a show going, hey, they executed that Cloud Atlas really well. But they weren't that funny. But they're gonna exit a show going, God, they were really funny. Because an improv audience will understand what you're doing, but a general audience will just know whether they had a good time or not. And I want your audience to have a good time. See you later. So that is the improv format known as the Cloud Atlas. Now, the Cloud Atlas is a longer format, as you can tell, and you just don't see a lot of that in Los Angeles because of our shorter time frames. I'm not trying to say this is the only way to do it, or I'm not even trying to say this is the correct way to do it. It's just the way that I'm familiar of doing it. And I hope that your troupe can do more research on it. Try it out, evolve it, make it your own. I know Ari in Oslo has his own way of doing it, and in discussions with them, it's very interesting. Please reach out to people beyond your city. Don't think that improv only exists with one team in one city. It exists all over the globe, and the Improv Boost is a good example of that. I commonly try to share improv teams from around the world, from different ways. It's only one person doing it, so I fail at it sometimes, but I try my best to aim. I try my best to succeed at that goal. Thank you for supporting. Please share, like, and comment. If there's any improv festivals coming up that I can help promote, message me at the Improv Boost, and I'll share them. I'm looking to connect communities and small teams in improv and give the small teams the ability to succeed just as much as a large-scale improv company. And here comes the rain. I don't know if you can see this, but it's raining. Okay, have a good week, everybody.